Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joe Parson. I'm the Senior Advisor to the Synthetic Training Environment Cross-Functional Team Director, Brigadier General Glazer. And today, I get to be your moderator. And I do realize that at 1700, there's a social downstairs. So although we want to make sure our panel is professionally done and we use adequate time, we want to get you to that as well. Cool? This year's conference theme, Innovating and Accelerating Training, Adapting to an Unexpected Future, highlights the dramatic changes facing the nation and the need for strong leadership and vision. This panel aims to support this theme by focusing on the synthetic training environment as the Army's future training capability, highlighting how the STE will revolutionize Army training by leveraging current live, virtual, constructive, and gaming environments and adhering to common standards and open architecture approach. The synthetic environment is expected to replicate the full range of operations, weapon systems, environmental conditions, patterns of life, weapon systems, and mission command processes. Most importantly, this capability will address the challenges of training to fight and win in multi-domain operations: land, air, maritime, space, and cyberspace. Today's panel members provide a wealth of knowledge and perspective in relation to the STE with a unique vision for Army training at large. We will conduct today's panel first by allowing each panel member 5 to 7 minutes to provide an update from their vantage point. We will then transition to a question and answer period where I will begin with a few questions already gathered, then open it up to the audience before closing out the panel, allowing for final comments from each of the panel members. And when we open it up to the floor, we have a microphone positioned here in the center of the room for you. Let us begin by introducing today's panel members. We'll begin with Major General David Francis, Commanding General of the U.S. Army Aviation Center of Excellence. Brigadier General Jeff Ray, Director, Network Cross-Functional Team. Brigadier General Larry Burris, the Commandant of the U.S. Army Infantry School and Director of the Future Soldier Lethality Cross-Functional Team. Brigadier General Charles Lombardo, Deputy Commanding General, U.S. Army Combined Arms Center Training, and Brigadier General William Glazer, Director, Synthetic Training Environment Cross-Functional Team. We will open up the comments today from Major General Francis and work our way down the panel from there. Sir, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Joe. And I'll just tell everybody that we agreed that 5 to 7 minutes per was way too long. So we're going to keep that shorter so we can get to your questions. I'm General Francis, Commander of the Aviation Center in Fort Rucker, where I'm responsible for the training of all initial entry aviators, advanced training aviators, and the proponent for aviation training writ large. And so we cover quite a swath, and I would argue that Army Aviation has used and continues to use simulation as an integral part of our training paradigm and will continue to do so in the future. We're at a unique point in Army Aviation where we are transitioning the force from counterinsurgency type operations to preparing Army Aviation to fight and win in large-scale combat operations. And what that means is that we have to train differently than we have over the past 20 years or so, our young leaders and our aviators, to be able to fight, survive, and win in those environments. And simulation is certainly going to be a huge part of preparing our aviators to fight in the complexity of large-scale combat operations. And so we have to be able to do that in a way that allows our aviators to fight and win against peer and near-peer competitors and their associated systems. And again, there's two ways that I look at this problem. One is in the institution, what we train at Fort Rucker, and the other is how we train our aviation force out in the operational force as well. And so as we modernize our aviation training enterprise, there are some characteristics that we're looking for that really reflect the following in terms of where we're going in simulation. What we want to do is leverage the technology that is emerging today to provide the very best training capability for all of our aviators out in the force. And so there are some characteristics that go with that I'd just like to highlight right now as many of you are participating in our modernization. The first is modular open system architecture. So we've learned from the past. We had stovepipe systems, simulation systems that couldn't talk to each other. They didn't use the same databases. They didn't use the same terrain. We couldn't use each other's systems or talk to each other. And that is not the way we train in the U.S. Army. We provide combined arms capability to the joint force, and we have to be able to train that way, not just live, but in simulation. And so our ability to have a modular open system architecture approach where we can maintain concurrency of our systems, which has been a challenge in Army aviation for sure, that we can rapidly update the threat replication in every one of our scenarios is absolutely critical so that we are training against our pacing threats at all times. As they develop, then we can rapidly change our simulation and upgrade our simulation to match that threat. We also need to include our updated weapon systems. So we don't just fight, out of an aircraft or out of a tank or out of a vehicle. It's a series of subsystems that are a part of those components that include weapon systems, aircraft survivability equipment, our ability to be seen and see and shoot and be engaged. All is critical to our ability to train. And I think that's a really important aspect of what we need to be able to upgrade almost in real time to be able to make sure that we're providing the very best training capability for our soldiers out there. In the aviation realm, we always have the challenge of the operational flight profile that goes into our simulations and keeping that concurrent as well. And that absolutely has to be part of any future simulation that we're talking about. And I think lastly, we have to get away from the large boxes that require a lot of money, contractors and so forth to operate. I think there's emerging technology that will enable us to get the same fidelity of simulation at a much lower cost, which is important. Cost matters in today's environment, and we have to be cognizant of that. But at the end of the day, what we have to be able to do is deliver home station training to the point of need, to replicate the challenging environment, the complex environment that we'll be facing in the future. And so I thank the leadership here for the opportunity to participate in this panel. And I'll transition over to General Ray for his comments.
Hey, thanks a lot, sir. Hey, so I'm Brigadier General Ray. I'm the Network Cross-Functional Team Director, as said earlier, and I echo a lot of the things that General Francis just mentioned. Number one, we are about open architecture from a Network Cross-Functional Team Director position. And two, we definitely do not want boxology in the future. We want to use software-defined capabilities if necessary. As each of you have heard and probably know, the network is fundamental to all our modernization efforts across the Army, and it underpins everything that we do when it comes to modernization and from a MDO and a JADC2 perspective as well. We just got out of PC21. And that was an opportunity to gain an understanding of the network and data requirements and our future weapon systems and C2 systems, how we deliver joint effects out there. So we're very interested in what we learned there. Building on that, there were like two takeaways that I saw was, one, a data fabric is required in order for us to continue to use our sensor-to-shooter capability, and an aerial tier to extend our network out there. From a network perspective, most of you know that we have capability sets that we focus on. We're currently delivering capability set 21. We're fielding it right now. Capability set 23, we're developing and experimenting on that. And then capability set 25, we're finalizing our designs and goals. On the 2nd of December, most of you may know that we're having a technical exchange meeting that will talk about the network itself. We'll kind of, lay out what we see the future of the network requirements are, and that'll happen on 2 December. So the focus of the network is three things. We're looking for transport agnostic systems in the future. Our systems should not be, when we go from pace to pace, we need it to be an automated pace from 5G, LTE, LEO, MEO. That's what we're looking for when it comes to transport. We're looking to move from a network-centric to a data-centric environment to support the STI, to support this capability. We can't stay network-centric. We got to get data-centric, cloud capability. We have to have AI and machine learning. And fundamental to that is standardization, again, a data fabric that we need there. And from a security architecture piece, that's the second part. As data moves across that transport, a security architecture is going to be required. So we're looking at multi-layered security, from TS all the way down to commercial solution for classified or any other capability that is out there today. And we're talking with NSA, trying to get them to come on board with some of the capabilities other than Type 1 as far as an encryption. So where are the priorities when it comes to the training environment? We're looking at three things. Number one is virtualization. Supporting a more agile, more mobile force, and then managing the bandwidth at echelon. That's going to be important. The integration, training applications needed to function within all the network architecture and standards. And I reiterate, no stovepipes, reducing those stovepipes, just as John Francis explained. And then the last piece is innovation. Young soldiers today that are coming into the military, they receive information differently. They're digital natives. That's why we have to move away from boxology. We have to get apps. We have to get, some type of environment where our soldiers clearly understand it from a digital perspective. So I look forward to your questions as we go forward, and I'll pass it over to General Burris as he goes forward.
Thanks, Jeff. Hey, good afternoon. First, let me start by saying thanks for the opportunity to be here and sit on this panel with my colleagues. I'm Larry Burris. I'm currently the dual-hatted as the director of the Soldier Lethality Cross-Functional Team and the Commandant of the U.S. Infantry School at Fort Benning. I'm the only CFT director who's dual-hatted, but there's some benefit to holding both jobs as my Chief of Infantry Commandant role informs much of my cross-functional team role. I'm a career infantry officer, and my background and experiences inform and heavily influence my work as the CFT director and commandant. The Soldier Lethality Cross-Functional Team focuses on modernizing the close combat force to ensure overmatch against any adversary. For those of you who aren't familiar with the term, the close combat force is a Chief of Staff Army-approved grouping of soldiers whose primary job is to close with and destroy the enemy in close combat. It includes 103,000 soldiers and 10,000 USASOC soldiers across all Army components from 5 MOSs and select formations and positions, those being infantry, combat engineers, fire support teams, scouts, and medics. We use soldier-centered design to ensure we provide new capabilities to our soldiers that they will want to use. Instead of waiting for a piece of equipment to be produced before we put it into soldiers' hands, we use iterative soldier touch points throughout the developmental process to inform design, ensuring that when the first unit is fielded, soldiers receive a piece of equipment that they will want to deploy and fight with. While we modernize the soldier and his or her equipment, we must modernize our training, with soldiers involved every step of the way. We must apply the concept of soldier-centered design to training, and the synthetic training environment will make that more possible, more effectively, and more efficiently. We treat the squad and the soldier as an integrated tactical system and evaluate overmatch in the context of lethality, mobility, ability, protection, survivability, and scalability. As I'm sure most of you are familiar, the Soldier Lethality Cross-Functional Team is responsible for driving requirements of 3 of Army Future Command's signature modernization efforts: the Integrated Visual Augmentation System, or IVAS, Next Generation Squad Weapon System, which includes the rifle, automatic rifle, fire control, and 6.8 millimeter family of ammunition, and up until recently, the Enhanced Night Vision Goggle Binocular, or ENVGB, all designed to drastically increase overmatch and lethality of the close combat force. ENVGB was the first AFC signature modernization effort to be spun off from a CFT to a traditional requirements owner. In partnership with PEO Soldier, we took a requirement written in 2017 and rapidly fielded enhanced night vision capability to 5 brigade combat teams to date using a directed requirement. At the end of September, we passed responsibility for that requirement to the Maneuver Capability Development and Integration Directorate at Fort Benning. With ENVGB, we proved that you can rapidly develop and field a capability that soldiers want to deploy with. When the 82nd Airborne Division deployed to Kabul to conduct non-combatant evacuation operations, they deployed with and used ENVGB. We've institutionalized the concept of soldier-centered design from day one, and it's proven to be successful with ENVGB, and we expect to field Next Generation Squad Weapon and IVAS in 2022. As Jeff mentioned about PC-21, we proved the concept of training and testing new systems operationally, even to the point of convergence. We were able to integrate concepts for future employment of IVAS. During the event, IVAS enabled information sharing using external cameras and a wireless tactical router, enabled soldiers in both rotary wing aircraft and Stryker infantry carriers to share real-time imagery and maintain real-time situational awareness while on the move. It's messier. There are more moving parts, but the old linear approach is too slow and cumbersome to get us to the point of sustainable, effective overmatch. Experimentation in events like Project Convergence validate the necessity for network-enabled soldier capabilities on the future battlefield. In our efforts to modernize and increase the lethality of our soldiers and our squads, we rely heavily on our partners, those in industry, ASALT, PEO Soldier, the MCDID, the Army Labs, and the greater Army Futures Command enterprise. Our partnership with the Synthetic Training Environment Cross-Functional Team is particularly exciting with respect to the IVAS program. At its core, IVAS is first and foremost a night fighting goggle. By adding synthetic training, IVAS will change the way soldiers train and rehearse, both while at home station and while deployed. STE's goal is to provide the Army with a usable, realistic, and complex training environment that allows units to improve readiness through repetition, achieving mastery of warfighting skills. And obviously, there are various platforms where this might be accomplished, but in the Soldier Lethality Cross-Functional Team, we're most excited about the IVAS as a fighting system that will also serve as a mobile training and rehearsal system. We'll be able to replicate a full range of operations in a variety of environmental conditions in various domains. If I put on my other hat as the infantry commandant, it's exciting to see many of these capabilities as they developed from concept to deliverable tool. The infantry school is a landing spot for many of the technologies we're discussing, either in technology or collective training doctrine or within the individual weapons training strategy. So what would I ask of all of you? We need rapid concurrency between tactical and training systems. We need to ensure we have common standards, interfaces, and host hardware and equipment. And as we develop and field new capabilities to our soldiers, we must strive to provide embedded training capability that can be used at home or to rehearse with while deployed. I look forward to the dialogue today, and thanks again for the opportunity to be here.
Hey, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for having us. I'm Chuck Lombardo from the Combined Arms Center Training. It's great to be here. You know, our job at CACT is really developing leaders and driving change in the Army. You know, really want to talk about kind of how we're operationalizing FM 7.0. Just came out on the street on the Army's birthday, so we're about 6 months into it. It was our how-to manual to get back to, after large-scale combat operations, decisive action, and then really trying to build the how-to manual and help unencumber leaders in the training environment and operationalizing 7.0. So as in CACT, we have, you know, the kind of responsibility of reconciling all the legacy equipment and all the legacy TSS enablers that are out there that we've been using for 40, 50 years, and then building bridges as, you know, in pursuit of the STE's arrival. So it's an exciting time right now as we're getting pieces of it everywhere. I would say a couple things that we're working on, really starting at the smart data on the objective. And you know, we just kind of went through an AIM cycle, and if you just think through the lens of talent management, training management, think of all the skills and sets and capabilities that we don't know about our soldiers, the data that we're leaving on the floor from a training management perspective. Our goal, you know, in CACT is, in working with everybody at this table, is how do we get that picked up off the floors and built into the assessment aspects of kind of training management. And so where ATIS, the STE, IPSE, all these systems have to build interfaces, that's one of the first things I would ask all of you as you provide capabilities to us, to reiterate what every panel member has said, is it's got to be non-proprietary open system architecture so we can truly see all that. And to really remove all the turnkey or the stovepiped enabling capabilities that are niched and good and they're deep, but they are isolated. And as a result, we're not able to kind of take those capabilities and the training aspects of it through a training continuum. So that's the first thing that we're really trying to work to get that holistic data, to build almost a KFIRS style of aviation training management for the rest of the Army. And so that, from a training management, that's our first kind of goal, is to get that all off the ground and really give ourselves a holistic snapshot of a soldier all the way up to the core, and from training, individual training readiness all the way up to unit training capability. The other kind of abilities that we're working on, it's got to be distributed, persistent, and interoperable. and just give a couple examples. In 2010, we did an NTC rotation, first time with the 1st Infantry Division, distributed with the division in the box, connected to Fort Riley with their other 3 brigades. And while they were training in that exercise, they were also certifying joint fires observers in a simulation at Fort Riley. And so they were shooting live rounds, seeing those viewed in a constructive environment and certifying soldiers out of other formations. We've got to make every round fired, whether it's live, virtual, constructive, train as many echelons as possible. That was just a very band-aided, bridged approach, but I think what the STE will provide us and what you all can help us deliver is a natural, persistent environment where we can do that every month. You just take the second example of that would be Warfighter 21-4, where the 3rd Corps had a French division, a British 3rd UK, who's probably like our 11th division. They train with us more than anybody, and 2 other US divisions. But it took an enormous amount of man hours, multiple 3 stars, getting exception of policies to plug that rotation together, and it took 2 years to build. We've got to be interoperable where we have common training scenarios and a true MPE persistent training environment, whether it's on this side of the pond or to our partners and allies in Europe, that they can latch onto. And it gets back to how are we continuing to unencumber training for our leaders. That persistent training environment would unencumber leaders where they're not thinking through the lens of a DCG all the way down to a company commander what they have to do to turn training on, giving them access to that persistent capability would incentivize innovative and rigorous training as we continue to build LISCO capabilities. And the other kind of point is the turnkey system of this. If it's going to take a lot of man hours and overhead to set up, it will not get used. So we look really forward to, as the STE starts to deliver, whether it's the soldier virtual training, the squad training, RVCT ground, and using that in that game engine, that truly will shave the man hours off and incentivize use of that simulation and constructive training, which is, you look at the chief's guidance, 2/3 of that type of training is going to be in those domains. So we just have to continue to push that. And then finally, I think it's got to be consistent. So whether you're at home station, at the combat training centers, or you're abroad, if you think about the 8-step training model and the training that is done by brigade commander number 1, that data's got to be live, that AAR's got to be accessible in the next round of training when it gets handed off to that next commander. And so, we all have like CD-ROMs of our CTC rotation in a footlocker of how bad we were. It would be we got to take and make that data to life and give it a better quality that it could be used and to influence the next set of training. So that's kind of the big rocks that CAC-T is working on, and I look forward to answering any of your questions and in a continued dialogue.
General Glazer.
All right, so I'm Will Glazer, and I'm the director of the STE CFT, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak with you all today. I'm honored to share the stage up here with some great warfighters in the United States Army, but they're great warfighters because they're all great trainers, and we're glad that they came on down here to speak to the simulations and training community down here. So at the STE CFT, everything that we do, we aim to empower commanders to prepare for war. So right now we're focused in on the training aspect of that, but I believe over time, a lot of our tools are going to be able to be used to achieve decision dominance on the battlefield, making soldiers more survivable. So what are we trying to do? I will tell you, we're just trying to set the new future training environment for the U.S. Army, and I dare say there's probably nothing much more important than that. The United States Army is in an inflection point right now. We're underneath a state of persistent modernization, but most of these modernization efforts revolve around the next generation tank, next cannon, the next helicopter. But we at the STE, we are not modernizing weapon systems. What we're doing is, I think, even just a little bit more important, because as Patton once said, and I paraphrase, wars are not won by weapons, but they're won by men and women, soldiers, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to modernize the United States soldier through training. And so there's a number of reasons we're doing this. The one asymmetrical advantage that the United States Army has always enjoyed and must continue to retain is our trained soldiers and prepared leaders. So as we're going through this, I think we have to really look and say, where have we been at, where are we at now, and where we need to go. And many of the training tools that we have are still based on air-land battle concept. Now, they've been refined over the last 20 years for a COIN environment, but I think the Army needs to take a critical eye on currently what we have, where we want to go, and specifically, how are we going to train multi-domain operations? The feedback that we're getting from the field is pretty consistent, and Chuck hit on this a little bit earlier, is they want easy-to-use solutions. So leaders spend less time in the planning and the preparation and the assessment and get more opportunities to cadet sets and reps. So in order to do this, we need to have this open architecture. It needs to be flexible. We need to allow leaders to go in there and tinker and create training support packages so that they can train against specific objectives laid out by U.S. Army standards. So it needs to be easy to use, it needs to be intuitive, as well as user-friendly. In the current fiscal environment that we're in right now, we also need to ensure that the STE is affordable, and not just what we're currently producing now, but how we maintain it over time. And it also needs to be efficient in the use of leaders' time. The whole reason that we use simulations and training in the Army is because it's an efficient use of resources. So simulations can conduct, with the use of simulations, we can conduct multiple sets and reps and save resources at the crawl and walk phase, and so that we can enter the live training environment at a much higher state of training readiness to take full advantage of that live training environment. So we don't compete with the live training environment. We complement it by conserving resources so that we can provide top-end superior live training exercises both at home station and our CTCs. Now, it's not just about the efficiency of the training, but as Chuck Lombardo has talked about, and we've talked about this a lot over time, is it's a lot about just saving leaders time. It takes a lot of time to plan and prepare these exercises. And we have great leaders in our Army, but what we don't have is an ample amount of time to do this. And so what we have to be able to do is leverage some of these authoritative data sets that are out there on the Army org server and automate a system to where we can populate these exercises and go to ATIS and pull in some of the data sets there so that we can easily set up these exercises and run them and then be able to export those results into a soldier's training file or a unit file so that we can automate these systems a little bit better. Now, in order to do that, we get more opportunities to do the execution of this training, and hopefully we can achieve what Malcolm Gladwell talks about with his 10,000 hours of training in order to become an expert in training at the lower tactical level for those NCOs. And for officers, often like to kind of describe it as Napoleon said, a coup d'oeil, where he talks about the flick of an eye, that an officer can go down there and he can quickly assess the combat situation and be able to do his MET-T analysis and issue out orders quickly because of the intuitiveness that he's learned from these training reps that he's gone through over and over again. So how are we going to do this? We're going to start off at the lowest level and we're going to scale up. We're going to start at the squad, the platoon, and company, and we'll scale up over time. I think this makes a lot of sense when we talk about software development, because what we're going to do is we're going to replicate every soldier, sensor, and weapons platform at the entity level and run our exercises. And as we grow and expand up to the higher echelons, and it starts overtaxing our IT systems, like our networks and our servers, we'll start aggregating these entities into units in order to achieve the efficiencies that we need in order to run these higher level exercises. So I will tell you that we've been doing this for a while. We've learned from our past mistakes, and one of those past mistakes is not factoring in concurrency into our training systems. This is something that General Francis is very passionate about, and he kind of hit on a little bit earlier. One of the efforts that we have in our RVCT, our Reconfigurable Trainers, is a joint effort between PEO Stride, PEO Aviation, and General Francis's organization to establish an avionics software emulator, and this will get back to fixing this concurrency problem that's plagued the aviation community for years. So as they update the operational platforms, we will also be able to update the simulators that these soldiers and these pilots they train on. And I think this is actually a huge win. The other thing that we're also working on with General Burris's team is establishing the CIVITs, the Squad Immersive Virtual Trainer, as a part of the new goggles that he's going to produce. It's originally designed to go after Battle Drill 6, which is clearing room procedures, entering a building. The capability has been tested out and been successful, as well as they've been able to provide an AAR capability. And what we've gotten from the soldiers at our touch points is it's good enough now. We want more of it, and specifically, we want it outdoors day and night. Now, getting this capability outdoors is a significant challenge because you have the ambient light that you have to deal with, you have ocular occlusion issues that you have to worry about, and then you also have SLAM, which is the simultaneous location and mapping problems. Well, they've been working on that, and just 2 weeks ago, Larry and I got an opportunity to see the outdoor capability out at PC-21, which was in Yuma, Arizona at noontime when the sun was as bright as can be, and all I'll say is we were really excited with the initial efforts that we've seen out there. And then the last thing that I have to just kind of highlight is everything that Jeff Gray and his network CFT does is absolutely critical for everything that we do in establishing the point of need requirement to get this capability out to the edge. I often say simulations are easy, networks are hard, and it's his network that we are absolutely dependent on, and we greatly appreciate all the support that he's been giving our team over the last couple of years and look forward to the future of working with him as well. That concludes my comments. I'll turn it back over to you, Joe.
All right, sir. So, gentlemen, I have a few questions already prepared for you, and we're just going to work our way down the panel, and then we'll make 2 rounds before we open up to the floor. So, starting off, General Francis, sir, and then, of course, everybody has a chance to weigh in as well, so it's not just the one I'm addressing it to. But, General Francis, how will the STE's ability to operate at multiple classification levels influence future training?
Well, that's an important question, and one that I think is one that we have to absolutely solve. We absolutely need to be able to train in a classified environment, and many of our simulation devices up to this point have not enabled us to do that, save just a couple. But it's absolutely imperative that we be able to train against our pacing threats with the same capability that we do our normal day-to-day training on, and that's got to be routine. We have to do that routinely. We have to be able to do it on a daily basis. We have to be able to do it at home station. If we have to travel somewhere to operate in that environment, then we're losing out. And so what we need to do is create the capability to be able to operate up to and including a TSSCI environment as required to meet our training objectives out there. So our ability to do that in current and future simulations is absolutely critical to our ability to maintain readiness.
Would anyone else like to pile on?
I think we're good.
And it's absolutely not required.
Sorry.
General Ray, the Army's unified network strategy is integrating and converging the tactical network with the strategic enterprise network. What are the training implications of that merger?
Yeah, great question. So, number one is integrating the tactical and strategic is it's a tough challenge. It's probably been something we've been trying to do for the last 10 years. What's important about the way we're doing it this time is that we're coming from the tactical edge and then joining it to the strategic environment. And that's going to be what's going to be most important. So like I spoke of earlier, one, we got to get our transport together. And 2, we have to get how we're going to move data from one end to the other, since we're more of a sensor-to-shooter environment. And then 3, the security architecture is going to be key. So when you hear about, how do we train in these multiple levels of security, that's going to be important. And the training is going to come down to, number one is that the enterprise and the strategic, once it's combined to the unified network, and data is going to be the most important piece. I think we're about 7 years behind on getting folks trained as AI, machine learning, and data specialists. And then when it comes down to training on a network like that, is going to be, can industry help us reduce the bandwidth requirement in order for us to continue the training that's going to be required using those heavy bandwidth using capabilities that's going to be designed from the STE environment. So it's going to come down to at the training centers, that we're getting folks that understands how data works, AI and machine learning works. I think we're about 7 years behind on that already, and that's going to be most important.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Wait, real quick, I just think on that data management, we can't have a cottage industry and data management centers across the world. We have to have the trust and get that centralized, otherwise we'll just create a ton of overhead. And I think that's where we have common systems that interface, that CTCs talk together to other kind of interdependencies. That's, and our partners can actually access some of that stuff too. I know we have to be careful of that, but the interoperability and the interdependencies that we build off that, I think, are really key.
Yes, sir. General Burris, how do virtual training options complement training progressions in a resource-constrained environment?
I think virtual training options we use them now, and they should not be reserved just for a resource-constrained environment. And if you look at the integrated weapons training strategy, the 6 tables of qualification for every level from individual up through tank crew, for example, table 2 is the virtual simulation, and that's where you make your money. Because this is about increasing lethality from my perspective of the close combat force and the infantry soldiers specifically. The more repetitions that we can give our soldiers in this simulated environment, the better prepared they are to go out and shoot live. It's in our doctrine already, but again, the more repetitions we can give. If I look at Fort Benning and the increase in OSIT length to 22 weeks for the 11 Bravos, we're shooting a lot of bullets out there on the ranges up on North Benning, and it's having an effect on the range operations. We all know that resources are not unlimited in terms of maintaining training facilities, ranges from MCOM, and so from that perspective, it's important that we continue to maximize the use of our simulations, whether it's EST or whatever it is, to enable our soldiers to continue to learn and progress and then be more prepared to go out to the range to execute the live fire more lethally and to standard.
Yeah, just one thing that always comes to my mind when you have that kind of question is about, usage rates. And so if they complement one another.
Yeah, I think some of this is about educating the force, right? And so, we just published the .40 recently, which is the new qualification manual, right? I've gone out and I've shot, M4 qualification according to the .40, and it's not easy. And I think, the comment I made to some folks yesterday is, in the training base, we've got to train our young leaders and soldiers on how to do this right. Because this is something that's going to have to be driven from the bottom up. And emphasizing the use of simulations or executing the .40 qualification in this case, you're not going to do well unless you practice at it. It's hard. It's much harder than being in the foxhole or the prone support or the prone unsupported that all of us old people remember. It's much different. And so we have to drive the use of and educate the formation on the benefits of using simulations, not just in a resource-constrained environment.
Anyone else like to pile on? General Lombardo, how will emerging technologies like augmented reality and virtual reality contribute to force readiness in the future?
Well, I think we've been practicing with some of this at the schoolhouse, but there's widespread application of the ability to teach leaders how to visualize, describe, direct, just from a mission command perspective. But it'll really help us in general get better currency into our training. And so and we've talked about this already with some of the RVCT, ground and air capabilities and being more software based, but using that tactile form touch, you can really compensate for a lot of the ever-changing capabilities in our platforms. That's just one simple way to do it, and we have to be confident and comfortable doing that. And I think our younger generation is very comfortable doing it. But I think also there are a lot of other capabilities from AI and augmented reality, whether it's vehicle ID. You could look at a two-dimensional paper as some of us very old folks are looking at, like the General Defense Plan in the 80s, and looking at the combat vehicle ID, which is part of your gunnery skills training, which is part of, the integrated weapons training strategy. Or you could look at three-dimensional through sights, and different vantages to get a better quality of the training and tie that to the constructive signature that you would see, or the MDO signature, the EMS signature that you'd see. So just looking at AI from vehicle ID, a very simple task, greatly enhances it. Kind of getting back to my point of distributed training, some of the battlefield visualization capabilities, AR, that we have today allows commanders in Europe in the Salwiki Gap to give commanders guidance on the ground to his follow-on divisions back in the United States. So we don't have to geographically be on the same piece of terrain to talk about mission command or to talk about engagement area development. And other people can gather into that, a CGSC class. So there's this cross-cutting across training, education and operating environment that can all garner that great rep. And so I think that's the mainstay. All that onto the backdrop of a great network can really enable leader development in the Army, and it could save dollars. We could all leverage those opportunities, and we can capture it to go back and use it to educate the force. So I think there's this widespread application.
And it's quite possible with the modernization efforts that some of these exquisite weapons that have come out, like hypersonics, we may not see Private McGillicuddy ever have a chance to fire one of those, but in the STE they could. Quite
Absolutely.
possibly.
Yeah, and it could have the simulation of it could be wrapped into a live rep, at a CTC or at a convergence. So really bringing the experimentation and training capabilities together really could help provide that access.
Yes, sir. General Glazer, how do you think the metaverse will impact Army training?
Okay.
Did you give my staff duty on Thanksgiving or something?
So, fortunately or unfortunately, this is kind of in my wheelhouse here, is, so the metaverse has been in the news a lot lately. And for those of you that haven't nerded out like I have over the years, I will tell you that all of that is actually based on a guy named Neil Stephenson's book, Snow Crash. He wrote it in the early 90s. He kind of talked about exactly what the metaverse would be, and it's essentially a virtual world where that everybody can kind of come together and they can do some planning, coordination, collaboration, and it was novel at the time. Facebook is adopting that now, but I will tell you, it's really not that much different than what people can do in, say, World of Warcraft, where they have a guild meeting and everybody comes together and plans their next raid. But with that, I will tell you that if you were to read a book, it wouldn't be that one. It would be, he's got one called Diamond Age. And in this book, it's a little girl gets a book that's basically a trainer. And it's an interactive trainer that basically is able to sense the individual and the environment around her and is able to fine-tune the training over time to create a incredibly talented young lady in this book. And I will tell you, as I've talked to Chuck Lombardo and we talk about the training management tool and the fact that we have all this big data out there that we can pull in to start providing very tailor-made solutions for units and being able to do that in an efficient manner to where we can save leaders time in training these things up and then populating a database that's able to track this over time. I think that at least in concept, this book, Diamond Age, kind of lays all of that out and makes me tremendously excited about some of the capabilities that are out there. The last thing that I'll say on this, though, is as much as the technology moves forward, even in this fantasy book, there still has to be a human in the loop because the Army is all about people, and you have to have that personal relationship. And so there's always got to be a commander in the loop that's managing this for his troops to make sure that he's giving his assessment and he's giving that mentorship to all those individuals that are going through these processes. So metaverse, maybe not, but Diamond Age, most definitely.
Thank you, sir. Come back to General Francis. Sir, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but you could probably list of do's and don'ts, and this one's focused on the don'ts. What are some of the challenges you have faced with legacy aviation simulators, and is the STE addressing those challenges?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Hey, the bottom line is that we absolutely owe world-class training capability to our soldiers. And everybody sitting up here is dedicated to that, and I know that many in this room are as well. We have failed in the past in many cases to provide concurrent systems that allow us to train against our pacing threats with the technology that we have and that our soldiers are using out in the field. And when we can't connect those two things, it's a decrement to the training. And it also makes soldiers lack in confidence in the systems that they're using. We cannot afford to do that in the future. So as we move forward, the STE is addressing many of those problems that we've had in Army aviation with concurrency. As was already mentioned, the aviation software emulation program is going to allow us to make sure that as we make upgrades to aircraft, the simulation's being upgraded simultaneously. And we don't have the luxury of just doing that with our future aircraft that we're in the process of developing right now. We have what I call the enduring fleet, Black Hawk, Apache, and Chinook that are going to be with us for the next couple of decades at least. And those will be upgraded throughout that time span. And so we have to make sure that we can upgrade our simulations accordingly so that we're training with the very best that we have to offer. Because as we talk about our modernization priorities, these will not all be fielded at the same time and across the entire Army. It will be an integrated approach, which means we'll be fighting with a combined force of future technologies and enduring technologies for the foreseeable future as we modernize the Army. So we'll be operating with this combined force. And our simulation and our training enterprise has to be able to account for that so that we're providing that world-class soldiers to our training. And I think the STE has made leaps and bounds at helping us to fix that problem, and I'm confident that we're going to fix that in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. And General Ray, you kind of touched on this real quickly in your comments, but can you provide more detail on the Army's data fabric approach and how industry can get involved?
Yeah, sure. Data, you heard it. How many times up here? Anybody count yet how many times data was said since we've been in the room? And everywhere that you go, it's about data. I mean, it really, truly is about data. Data is the backbone of what we're doing in the Army. And we've created a lot of data, but it has been stovepiped for the last, 30, 40 years. Our data has been stovepiped. Whether it's intel data, whether it's mission data, I can go on finance data, it doesn't matter. It's been all stovepiped. And now we're bringing in the sensors. We're bringing in the sensor data, right? And that's unstructured data that we're bringing in, and now we're trying to figure out, how are we going to make it usable to our commanders to make informed decisions? And that's where the data fabric comes in. And so out of PC-21, we had a data fabric on board there, and we pulled in all the sensors. We pulled in all the information that we could possibly pull in through that data fabric. But what we found out is that there were over 1,000 different languages across all the different services that we had to pull into that data fabric. So the question is, can industry help us in one, I don't want to say standardization, but we have to somehow get to a point where at least we're using the same APIs in order for us to get on that data fabric and actually utilize a data fabric that can aggregate using machine learning and AI that data and making it available to commanders. And in a training environment, the amount of data that's going to be utilized between all those different simulation systems, that data fabric is going to be required in order to aggregate that data as well.
Thank you, sir. General Burris, what do you see as the future of embedded training capabilities for individual soldiers given innovations such as SIVT? And may want to add on to that, can you explain the difference between embedded and appended? And maybe you want to add on to about the appended part. That's my love to you, sir. I'm just
Thanks, I appreciate that add on there. So we owe it to our junior leaders, our team leaders, squad leaders, platoon leaders to provide an embedded training capability for the close combat force. We should not, our leaders should not have to schedule time at a sim center to use a squad virtual trainer or any other trainer like that. We can do better than that. And with capabilities, Will talked about Civet. And with Civet, a squad leader can go in, scan a room, the terrain, the walls, et cetera, all the furniture in a room, for example, and build a scenario with avatars, different threats, and then execute that Battle Drill 6 with his or her soldiers, and then conduct what is a first-class AAR. It really is impressive. And the capability is much farther along than I had originally thought. But every squad in the Army should be able to do that. And not only just to train at home, we've got to be able to take this forward and deploy. Whether it's a tank crew or a Bradley crew or a Stryker crew or a dismounted squad, they should be able to deploy with their embedded training system to continue training overseas, or more importantly, to rehearse for operations that they may conduct. And using things like One World Terrain, I'm doing a lot of plugs for you here, right, man?
I appreciate
All right.
it. Love it.
Things like One World Terrain, right, where we can download what the terrain looks like, and we can build graphics, and we can execute rehearsals in an embedded trainer, for example. When the 82nd deployed to Kabul, they asked for One World Terrain so that they could see what HKIA looked like and how they wanted to secure the airfield. And we ought to be able to provide that capability down to the lowest level so that we can continue to train, get better, and more importantly, become more lethal as we conduct combat operations. I did not get to the appendage part because I'm not that smart.
Okay. But we do have the rest of the panel.
Yeah, I got that real quick. So the appended and embedded. So the embedded training capability would be something like we're doing with IVAS, and we are embedding the civets capability into the basic structure of it. An appendant would be basically a bolt-on solution. So if you had a tank out there and you would bolt on a kit that would be able to provide you some type of feedback. So one is actually a part of the system itself, and the other one is basically a bolt-on solution, which would be the appendant. No problem, brother. Rock Lamar.
Thank you, gentlemen. Team effort. General Lombardo, the Army has considerable portfolio of legacy training devices. So why not use those devices instead of the next generation of devices?
Quite simply, it won't meet the MDO capable or the MDO ready force. So, I mean, you just look at the CTCs right now, the OPT-4 vehicle that we use, the OSV, it has like one attack surface, direct fire. So if you just think about being MDO capable, being able for an attack aviation platform to use it, to be able to measure it from an EW, a cyber perspective, it's not meeting the need. So I think there are about four things, though. It's old tech. About 40% of our brigade combat teams' weapons are being replicated either at home station or combat training centers or training abroad. And so what that, we're a doctrinally driven Army, concept built, doctrinally driven Army, and that lack of currency is driving bad tactics, techniques, and procedures. You're not using your claymores, you're not using your grenades, you're not employing your Mark 19s or your 320s. And so I think that's the first of, we got to get that, and we're white carding the heck out of everything. So if you're an aviator and you can't be killed correctly, or if you can't get the right realistic effects, then that starts to degrade the rigorous and the accuracy of the training. So tough, realistic training is being impacted. I think second, we're still working in the 20th century acquisition process. And I have a little bit of in leader development of being in the Inc. 2 brigade. I was in the network brigade as an ABCT commander for a while, and got really immersed into building the network and fighting all that. And I liked what the communication side of it, pushing stuff out, capability sets. And so that was the one good thing I think that we pulled out of it and really learned. But we've got to obviously get a lot faster, more agile, and we can't be a full Army BOIP type of distribution. We have to be comfortable with pockets of this being built and introduced to the Army and getting it in the hands of our soldiers and get the innovation going there. And so I think we have to continue to work that. And thankfully we got Will and all these great CFT directors here and with STRI able to accelerate that. And so when I came into the job 18 months ago, we were not going to really start putting miles out till 2035. And I think under General Richardson's foot in our butt, we're looking at like 2026. And as you look out on that floor right now, we have a lot of great TRL levels out there. We just we're at a golden year where Will's going to deliver, the brain of this, and we'll figure out what we want to latch on to it. But it's exciting because at some point we can we can close the gap on that 60% and get rid of the white cards, whether we're live, virtual, or constructive, because we got white cards everywhere. The other thing is just the age of our legacy equipment. It costs almost 3 times the amount just to sustain the old stuff that's at its end of useful life that it would be to. And at some point, you have to just pull the Band-Aid off and cut it. And as the chief said, don't be putting new money at old crap. Paraphrasing there, but and I think we have to, in a downward trending budget era, we have to be really mindful of that. And so I think that's another component. And then finally, just the bin management, the live, virtual, constructive. We can get them to talk through some LVCIA, or when we have like the G2 and G6 of the Army getting us, high-speed guards, and but it takes too much bandwidth, no pun intended, to connect those bins together, and we need them to be naturally connected in a common scenario that's accessible from a squad leader to a corps commander. And right now, that's just not there unless it takes every 2 years for us to do it. But that's not a natural way to do it, and it's not going to incentivize doing home station training that's more tough and realistic. So that's kind of the big 4 that we're looking at.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
And my last question, General Glazer, what can industry do to support your requirements for the STE?
Okay, so I did my IPB And we did TSIS about 5 months ago, and this question came up previously. And it's a great question, but fool me once, you're bad, fool me twice, my bad. And so actually, I have a backup slide up here real quick to answer this exact question.
Raise you a slide.
And so really, I'm just going to talk about the bottom left-hand corner because I think it's a pretty good story to kind of relay to industry on just using an analogy on exactly how we need to move forward. And so, yeah, I'm a tanker. I'm a little bit biased, but I will tell you, the Army's bought a lot of great stuff over the years, and then they bought some things that weren't so great. And I think one of the best things they ever purchased was the M1A1 tank and everything that it's done over the years. Now, of course, I'm biased, but if you look right in front of the loader's hatch, there was always a cap in front of the M1 tank. And when I was a lieutenant, I had absolutely no idea what that thing was for. We used to take a road wheel, we would bolt it there, we'd throw our TA-50 in there, and we'd go rolling through the Ardennes forest over there in Germany. But I asked the master gunner one time, I was like, hey, what is this cap for? And he goes, oh, well, I just got back from master gunner school. This cap is going to be for the independent thermal viewer that's going to come online eventually. But we don't have the time, we don't have the money, and actually the technology is not there right now. But when we produce this independent thermal viewer, it'll allow the commander to locate targets while the gunner is servicing other targets, and it's going to make the acquisition of the tank commander and the crew a whole lot faster. And I was like, okay, well, that'll never happen. But sure enough, fast forward 8 years when the M1A2 comes out, it has the independent thermal viewer on it. Now, the kicker is they didn't have to replace the entire turret. They didn't have to drill a hole in the top of these tanks and do a multi-million-dollar expansion in order to provide this additional capability. And I can guarantee you it wasn't a green suiter that figured this out. It was some brilliant engineer that's reading the requirements documents. He knew where we wanted to go. He knew the shortcomings that he had in the current physical environment and then where the technology was, but he planned for the future, and so therefore he put that hole in the top of the tank to when the capability eventually came around, it was very efficient and very affordable to upgrade this tank and give this additional capability. So as we look to the STE and we put these things together, that's why it needs to have this open architecture. It's got to be flexible. We've got to be able to be planning today for future capability sets down the road, so it's much more efficient to bring those type of capabilities into the STE, and we can expand the capabilities out to our soldiers in the field. I was prepared.
Thank you, sir. Okay, at this time, we're going to open up to the audience. So if anyone has a question, go ahead and please step up to the microphone. And we can wait you out. No? Thank you, sir.
Hey, first of all, thanks for the panel for all the great work you all do for the Army. My name is Todd McCaffrey. I'm a retired soldier. Really, I've got a two-part question. And General Glazer, I think part of it's for you, and the other I think is for General Lombardo, but I'll certainly take options from the panel. Hey, we're an Army that obviously trains as an Army. We also train as a joint and a combined force. So as the synthetic training environment comes online, what are your concerns, or what are we doing to ensure we don't outpace both the joint force and our allies and partners who are going to need to leverage that in that piece? That's one part. The second part, if I could continue on, is kind of a different vein, but to General Lombardo, maybe it's in your lane. The other piece has occurred over the last, certainly in most of our career for search Iraq and Afghanistan, we have relied on industry to provide training as a service. And there have been a variety of capabilities that come out from industry as a service. What you're talking in many cases, as the ST key comes on, would appear to be a divergence away from training as a service back toward the Army with open architecture, the kind of capabilities. So if you could comment on the future of training as a service for the Army, I'd appreciate that as well. Thanks again for what you all do.
Okay, so the first thing I'll talk about is the joint and combined nature of the synthetic training environment. And so currently right now, we are working at that lower tactical level, and we will eventually expand up. So right now, we are not as joint or as combined as we obviously need to be. But as we move up to these higher echelons, when we start talking about next generation constructive, and we start worrying about integrating in our joint partners and our coalition partners, that's going to be a primary effort down the road. We haven't focused on that as much now because of the level that we're working at, but that's definitely a shortfall that we're probably going to need to fix. Training as a service, sir, I don't have a good answer for that. I don't know if any of the other panel members could help me on this.
Well, I mean, I know everything we put in 7.0, our doctrine, we're trying to get our NCOs back into training. And so we've all been to, MTCs or shoot houses, and we've seen a lot of our leaders with their cell phones in the back while this incredible retired, contractor's training our soldiers. And so every time I bring my sergeant major with me to an event, he's like, all right, let's get the phones back in the pockets and get our NCOs back and running and driving training and commanders to drive training. So, I think the direction of the Army is absolutely use that when we can to kind of seed corn and build the capability, but eventually I think that's kind of the future. We don't have the money for that overhead. And it's more about the development of those leaders as we're trying to build trainers to take to ownership of that training. Outside of nets and NEFs, we got that, but the day-to-day training, we have to own it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a nuanced question too, because it depends on what you're doing. Right. When we're talking about soldier training, training is leader development, and that's an absolutely crucial part of what we're doing. We are going to train the lieutenants and young soldiers we have coming in the Army today are going to be leading large-scale combat operations in the future. We have to train them, and training as a service is not going to do justice to building the leaders that we need in the future. However, there are some potential places in the institution, right. That we may have to rely on that. As the aviation guy, I will tell you that we rely on a lot of different services to do initial entry rotary wing training. So it depends on where and what you're doing when you talk about training as a service. But as it relates to building leaders, we got to do it.
Yes, sir, and I think that could go in a couple ways of whether it's targetry, some stuff, or sim, drop-in kits, some of the stuff we may want to use as a service because we don't want to buy a bunch of stuff that's going to be updated every few years. So I think that there is a healthy balance that I think we'll all we'll part that fine line. And I know Ms. Saunders and Tim would probably have a lot better feedback from STRI on that. But yeah, that's kind of, I think, how we're looking at it as well.
I think as a service is like a la carte, right? It's going to be bandwidth as a service for the synthetic training environment. We're not going to just buy a bunch of bandwidth one time and just hold on to it and not utilize it. We're going to buy it as a service. We're going to train, and then we're going to reuse it. And so I think as a service is come in different ways. Platform as a service, train as a service, and bandwidth as a service. You can go on and on.
Good afternoon. My name is Major Oscar Gonzalez. The value of data is inherent and very clear, from informing soldiers of their performance to having leaders have data-driven and data-informed decision-making. Moreover, data fabric, as has been suggested in the panel, is extremely powerful in terms of longitudinal data and bringing information together and actually extracting high-level intel. To that extent, how or if the Army plans, how will it match the human capability required to build a data ecosystem of such nature? Speaking more clearly, will they hire more statisticians, researchers, scientists, behavioral scientists, so that the hardware that's featured here is matched with the human capacity needed to harvest the information, make sense of the information, and ultimately exploit it? Especially given that other companies are, in the industry, you just hire these highly trained and highly educated individuals. How does the Army plan to overcome that challenge of human resource that's technically capable of managing such data?
Yeah, let me take a first swing at that as the training guy, TRADOC, representing TRADOC here today. I will tell you that question has come up routinely here in very recent discussions. And when you think about, are we going to just hire data experts or data scientists, and there are levels of data expertise out there, and really what we're discussing is we have to train soldiers to understand data. We're not going to hire a new army of data scientists out there to manage that for us. We have to be smarter about how we're training soldiers to manage data, to deliver information that provides decision dominance to our commanders out there. I'll let you guys chime in on that.
Yeah. I guess in my opening comments, you heard me say that we're about 7 years behind on that particular piece, right? The digital natives and getting them to where they're AI, machine learning, data scientists, data, Jedis, whatever you want to call them. And yes, in the schoolhouses need to focus on how do we train it. And it's not only from a signal perspective. I mean, the cyber, everyone is going to have their hands on data. And so therefore, everyone will have to have some level of training when it comes to how to use and manipulate data in the future.
Yeah, I think we also have to make sure we ask for what's the information requirement? What do we want to measure? And so as you look at what makes, I'm a cavalryman, how do we develop a 1,000-point tank shooter? We need to ask the right questions and measure the right data from a H2F perspective, for a soldier's career, but also to create that crew. And then we need to be able to track that through the journey of that career, of those soldiers and of that crew. And I think, so asking the right questions so we measure the right things, I think is helpful too, beyond the data aspects of it. But I think from training management, this is where I think the STE and all these systems have to talk, so our training management will match our 21st century talent management aspirations.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, thanks. Good question.
Yeah, that was a good question.
Really good.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Jim Applin from Medco. My question is for General Lombardo. Sir, it seems in the past 20 years or so, our non-commissioned officer corps has essentially lost the art of being a trainer, and we've talked about that today quite a bit. Is there a plan at the general officer level or discussions about our PME and how do we educate the non-commissioned officers about the synthetic training environment? In my circles, I find that when I talk about it, they don't understand, even at this point, sir.
And sir, I don't want to speak for a lot of our, our NCO academies and TRADOC, we're working on this. From CAC-T, we are working really in the Combined Arms Center inside of the PME, and I'll let General Francis talk about how he's training his NCOs, but we are talking about this. I mean, it's, I grew up, my tank gunner drew that tank. It was 008. It was the 8th Abrams tank built in the 2nd Armored Division, and my gunner had a green book, a little supply handbook. It had every barometric pressure every time he bore side that tank for 9 years. And we don't have that. We don't have 9 years of reps, the 10,000 hours for our NCOs, but really the leaders. It's not just NCOs, but young officers that know how to drive training. And so I think it's both the officer and NCOs that we've introduced training management classes in BOLIC, and I'll let General Francis talk, but also at CGSC as a part of FM 7.0 and really driving training to the setup of training, whether it's, majors driving platoons, assisting that battalion commander, but I'll defer to a couple of our commandants here and what they're doing with their NCO side.
Yes, sir. I did the Benning Non-Commissioned Officer Academy quarterly training brief yesterday, specific to infantry ALC and infantry portion of SLC. And what we're doing is our NCOs have to understand the doctrine and how the Army tells us to asks us to do things before they can deviate from that. And what we're doing is we're revising our POIs to ensure that our non-commissioned officers know what the standard is. If I use qualification as an example, we show the non-commissioned officers in ALC what qualification should like, how to go through all 6 tables so that as they go back out to their unit, they say, hey sir, hey ma'am, how come we are not shooting or training in accordance with the .40, for example. And it's grounding our non-commissioned officers in the basics. As we transition our focus to large-scale combat operations, it's making sure that squad leaders and future platoon sergeants understand the battle drills, right? Beyond battle drill 6, enter clear room, right? Because when we execute this, that's what they're going to be doing is executing battle drills. And so how do they train their soldiers on how to do that? And so I think from an infantry perspective and PME at Fort Benning, we're working to get after this. And we're using not just live training, but also simulations. Right now, we're using VBS3 and a couple other things to use simulations because that's what we have. But it's about making sure the non-commissioned officer understands how to train the Army way so that as they go out to their units and they learn unit-specific TTPs, they can incorporate those in.
And I think to get after that, and all the commandants of all of our centers of excellence are revamping PME writ large right now for our NCOs, for our warrant officers, our commissioned officers at echelon. So from lieutenant to lieutenant colonel all the way through pre-command course, all of that's being revamped as we speak. And I'll just use an aviation maintenance example kind of to the, training as a service. Well, we did maintenance as a service for a long time as we were rotating through Iraq, Afghanistan, and places, and we ended up having contractors do a lot of that maintenance. And we know that there's a gap there that we are filling and training with our non-commissioned officers in Army Aviation to fill that gap. And that's one of the dangers of training as a service or whatever service you want to provide, like you mentioned. We have to make sure that our NCOs, our leaders, are competent in those tasks. They know how to train them. The STE provides an environment and the tools to do that training with, but knowing how to train is critical right up front.
Hey, the last thing that I'll add real quick is, so it's not just in TRADOC that they are acknowledging that this is an issue. That's also happening in the force. So that was very clearly one of the shortcomings that was identified over in Europe. And so when they do the pre-command course for both company command and battalion commander in Europe, they actually implemented an additional block of instruction to training management to get after that exact problem. And it's nobody's fault. I mean, it's just the process that we went through in the 90s that we did training management really well. And then during the war years, it was much more of a conveyor belt, so some of those skills atrophied, but it's very clearly acknowledged and getting after it now.
To the panel, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question.
Gentlemen, good afternoon. Lieutenant Colonel Mike Barnett, Mission Command Battle Lab, Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Question is sort of a forward-looking question with regards to the future of the STE in support of experimentation, trying to assess the aim point 2035 and then 2035 and beyond force.
So I can touch on that real quick. So I will tell you that, as I mentioned earlier, that right now the STE is focused on training, but I think a lot of the tools that we're developing is going to be able to assist commanders in decision dominance in the future, specifically when we talk about reconnaissance, rehearsals, and specifically wargaming. Had a great conversation with 5th Corps right prior to their recent warfighter, and what General Kolashevsky is demanding is the fact that he doesn't understand why he doesn't have a wargaming capability within inside his TOC, so that when he's going through and doing course of action analysis, he can't upload that into a system and get some type of feedback. And he'd like to have it where it's fast enough and intuitive enough to where actually when he's getting to a decision point in the fight, he could actually upload that and get some feedback from some analytics. And we are actually proposing this is probably a level of detail that you don't have to know, but so with Rider is a large pot of money that DOD is targeting for investigating these exact types of problems. And we're going after some of those monies so that we can actually provide a wargaming capability. Now with that, that's much more for the operational force, but I can see tangents coming off of that will also be able to provide some sort of capability for the analytical and experimental communities as well.
Yeah, we're in our synthetic training environment, like TRADOC proponent office, we're working some of these right now. You know, Dexter's and some of our capabilities already do some of these. It's a low overhead wargaming capability, but through the battlefield visualization integration tools today that's at our CACTIF at Fort Leavenworth, we're able to tie some of this together today right now, and where a Corps could use it, a CGSC or an MCTP could use it on the road with divisions and corps. But it's really meshing that capability, tying AFATADs, TAEUS, AMDUs into that. The other piece we're working on, we have MCTP that works for me, and so I'm trying to get, you know, as we lean towards an AI, ML, OP4-based capability, take Brandon Payne, the world-class OP4 commander, and have him build those 1,000 bloodless battles and start to build the algorithm for those right now. There's no reason why we can't take those, bake them into a menu and a capability. So as the STE starts to come on board, those are latch capabilities. We can build those OP4 behaviors to enhance true wargaming capabilities, or to do a combined arms rehearsal, and you know, being able to tie and show the kind of the visualization for an MDO capable army and how you'd fight that.
And then I'll also carry on with, so it's not just the battle labs that are asking for that. ASCC commanders as well as COCOM commanders are often taking their simulations officers and their ORSIS and putting them together to establish a wargaming cell, which is great, except for they don't have a good tool in order to do that. And so, yeah, we very clearly have gotten that message from our senior leaders out there.
Thank you all, gentlemen.
And I think this will be our time for our last question.
Hi, my name is Julie Kent. I'm coming from the training subcommittee, where we've just done a number of papers on stress analysis, neuroanalysis, and that type of biofeedback. And I'm wondering, as you're developing STE CFT, how you're building in space for incorporating that both data collection and then providing that to the soldier in the squad.
Chuck, you want to start with this?
Well, I mean, ma'am, we're looking at that, and I don't know if Randy Hill's here from USC's campus. He's probably celebrating that, he stole one by our football coach from OU right now. But there are some, I'm a Notre Dame fan, so I'm heartbroken right now too. So it's really sad today. But no, ma'am, we're looking at, and part of it's in collaboration with Will and some of the AFC initiatives, but some of the wearables, biometrics that we're looking at and integrating it into the health and holistic fitness. And I know we're copying and taking the Marine Corps is using some of it, I think, with their Force Recon, where they're able to actually reduce attrition rates by 20-something% by being able to get left of the boom and some of that stress. We want that from a training management, TMT to Army Training Information Systems. We want the history of our soldiers to be able to show them where their break points are, or how is their fitness, their sleep, their nutrition, how is that aiding into decision making and decision dominance. But we're all looking at that and trying to bake it in. What we don't want is stovepiped wearable capabilities. We want that integrated across on a soldier to have that, not just in the shoot house. We want it at PT, or when he's in a rotation, or when he's actually on the Salwicki Gap doing a wet gap crossing with a partner. We want to be able to measure our soldiers and see how they're performing throughout the span of their career, and maybe looking at it as a part of maybe Project Athena or other touch points where we can revisit and do that self-reflection and make it more of a holistic, continuous process.
I think that's an interesting area, and I know there are some applications being tried at different venues for aviation training, for instance, where you can determine based on some biometrics whether something is retained in long-term memory or not. And you can tell the stress level of an individual, so you can ramp up or down the training as required. So we're very interested in taking a look at that, and I think that's in its fairly nascent stages right now.
Yes, ma'am. That's good.
Thank you.
And thank you all for the great questions. I think we're going to finish up with closing comments. And so if you have any alibi or any parting shots, we're going to start with General Glazer and work our way back.
Okay, I'm damn glad to be here, and appreciate all the conversation and discussion. I think this was tremendously helpful and very enlightening to me as well. With that, I'll pass it to you, Chuck.
Now, it's neat to see on the floor. We have a lot of capabilities out there, and I think everything we're all talking about, there's those pockets of success, and it's been shown that we can do it. It's really bringing all of it together and meshing it together. I think that's going to be the true test, especially over the next 3 or 4 years, as we are getting to that point where a lot of these capabilities are coming on hand. But thanks for everything. It's great engagement today.
So I just say thanks for what all of you do for soldiers, sailor, airmen, Marines, guardians out there in the force. At the end of the day, it's about fighting and winning wars against near-peer adversaries. It's about increasing lethality of our soldiers and the joint force to make us successful in the future. And so thanks for what all of you do to enable that.
Yeah, and thanks again. I'll just echo everything that everyone said. I mean, it's really about you helping us, help the soldiers, accomplish their mission on the battlefield every single day. And I know the most important part of it is how do we really get the joint force to work together and our coalition partners. That's going to be the future. As we go into PC22, it's going to ask for how do we bring in a coalition partners and and a mission partner environment. So we're going to need the assistance there as well. So thanks, everybody.
Well, thanks for everybody for being here. As I mentioned before, delivering world-class training to our soldiers, I believe, is a moral imperative. We absolutely must deliver it. We must have the partnership of industry to do that. You have the brain power to bring some of these things to reality, and we need your help to get there. So thank you all very much for your questions today and for participating in this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Gentlemen, thank you again. Everyone for participating, thank you for being here today. Again, there is a social downstairs. As a former Command Sergeant Major, drink responsibly. Stay thirsty, my friends.
Stay thirsty.